which makes it ideal for invasive species. Also, we've been noticing invasive Phragmites been showing up more, and yeah, so.
We also have a few vectors of transmission that kind of come through the land. We have Highway 69 that cuts right through the territory, along with Highway 529, the railroad, and the river. So these are ways that we have seen invasive Phragmites encroaching onto the landscape.
The Department of Lands and Resources Environment team has identified invasive Phragmites on the shoreline of the Magnetawan River back in 2019. That was when we first noticed it, and we first went out and did our cut. We partnered with the Georgian Bay Forever and managed it, and then implemented a management plan for the next 5 years. 2020 was when COVID happened, so we weren't able to get out there, but we've cut it down in 2019, 2021, and we cut it down again this year, 2022. We have a couple more years of cutting, and then hopefully in 2025 we'll go out there and assess it and see how much we've trimmed it down and stopped it from spreading.
Yeah, and so Georgian Bay Forever was able to teach our staff and our community, which is made up of community members and specialists like myself coming in to work with the community and teach us how to manage the invasive species ourselves. And so going in with raspberry cane cutters and cutting right down at the base under the water so that the water can seep into the roots and over the long term eradicate the Phragmites from that space. We do it before it seeds. We're able to bundle it up and bring it way above where the spring flooding would happen to ensure that it doesn't get swept down the river. And then after a year of drying out and laying in the sun, we are able to do a controlled burn and manage it. By noticing these patches in the early stages, we're able to do it at a community level. It's a small enough patch that it's feasible to do this by a department.
So like she said, we harvest it before seeding, and we'll leave it on top of the row crop. We'll do a controlled burn the following year to help with the spreading of the seeds, and that's pretty much what we did.
And so upon the first identification of this patch, we started spending more time doing prevention and education. One of the best ways to prevent or not beat Phragmites is to not have it at all, because once it comes on the land, it is extremely difficult to get rid of. So prevention is key. Prevention in terms of educating and ensuring that any construction vehicles coming from off the community are hosed down and rinsed, make sure that they're not bringing seeds through their wheels or the tracks. Also, just in terms of kind of coming along our corridors, we were watching those spaces with a high assessment just to ensure that we catch it right away.
So Magnetawan First Nation applied for funding from the Invasive Species Center to help fund an opportunity to manage another patch. The Lands Department was able to identify a new patch of invasive Phragmites with DNA testing from the Green Shovel collaboration. We are also able to do a DNA testing that we actually have native Phragmites on our land also. So that's a good thing to see and notice. So it's also nice to see that we have the native and
nice to see not the and,
but yeah, that's nice to see.
And ensure that we're controlling and cutting down only the ones that do have that invasive. So like Terry mentioned, we were able to manage another patch through this funding through the Invasive Species Center. It was a different sort of habitat style. So our first patch was directly in the river, which for management's sake makes it quite easy as you can just cut below the water line. This patch was more in a wetland. We have a lot of species at risk on MAG, and therefore this wetland is also critical habitat for some of our turtles. Right beside, so it's directly adjacent to the railroad track, and it's in a wetland. Not thankfully, but we were able to, the substrate, there was enough water in there that we were able to just dig our cane cutters or our shovels down deep enough and trying to cut below the water line again. And so we assessed the site or identified it in 2021. We were able to get the DNA testing done and confirm invasive frag. In 2022, we did our first management cut of hand cut felt like a fairly large patch, but it was just under 0.1 of a hectare. Anyway, so still large enough. 2023, we have plans to implement our second cut, and so on and so forth. The best practice for invasive species is to manage for 5 years, but you never know. So in 2027, there'll be a continuous site assessment, and these sites will be continued to monitor at least once a year for any potential regrowth. And so, like you can see on this picture, how adjacently close to the railroad track it was.
So we were able to partner up with Georgian Bay Forever again. They came out and helped us cut it and remove it. So we cut it as low as possible under the water level, help drown it, and hopefully stop the spread.
Yeah, and continue to educate, ensuring that our community is knowledgeable about what it looks like, how to ID it, so that we can all have this part in being land guardians and managing the land. We're looking at kind of a long-term project of being together as a community to protect our land and finding and identifying the patches and risks before they overtake and become unmanageable is really important. And yeah, kind of goes over. I see there's some questions. This is our last slide. I want to leave a lot of time for questions.
Yeah, I can read out the questions for you here if it's easier.
Sure.
Okay, so the first one, thank you for your talk, by the way, that was very great. The first question here is, what do you consider a feasible size? An acre, few meters? What about removals in winter?
Feasible, I guess that depends on how much manpower you have and how much time you have to allocate. Our patches were
roughly fairly small, thankfully. Like we mentioned, this patch that was near the train tracks was 0.1 of a hectare.
Under, I think
Yeah.
Ended up, we mapped it out and calculated it was 0.06 of an acre.
Yeah.
And that took us two days of intense cutting. And it got a fairly huge pile that you couldn't have carried by yourself. But the biggest thing is manpower size, and then where and how it is, because our patches are have water components to them, is where we can cut. If it's on land, it becomes a little bit trickier. And yeah, removals in winter. Georgian Bay Forever, who has done a lot of work with Phragmites, kind of gave us our advice on managing ourselves, and doing it before it seeds is the best way, because a seeding means that all these more little seeds are going to spread. And yeah, so I'm not sure about removals in winter. I believe removals in midsummer are ideal.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to know. The next question here is, would you prioritize wetlands or roadsides, or does it matter at all? This person here is from an island community.
Personally, based on the knowledge that I've had working with the community and the species, I would prioritize wetlands, just because they are like the lungs of the land. They filter the water that we drink. They're habitat to a lot of species, a high biodiversity, tons of turtles, snakes. Therefore, that would be the priority we would take at MAG. Roadsides, they're also important, but they're at a higher risk because of the amount of cars that go through and the travel. So anything that where you have cars and people coming from different areas, it increases the risk that you could have a invasion.
Yeah, for sure. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
What time of year do you do the cuts?
Yeah, midsummer at least. So before the seeding, all that. So that help to stop the spread of it. So yeah, I'd say anywhere from like July to August would probably be the best time to start cutting.
Awesome. That's great to know. Did you make any unrelated, unexpected discoveries?
I guess, well, having that idea of it being directly adjacent to the rails was kind of a related but unrelated discovery, because how many more patches are along rails that don't get identified because nobody walks those corridors. It's sort of a kind of follow through is we had a master's student going out on the railroads, working with Canadian Pacific Rail, doing railroad ecology. And then going on that student, community members and our youth in our department would go out with them. And it was going out on those that this patch was discovered. And so yeah, it's kind of how much more impact are rails contributing to spreads of things like that. I think that was an unexpected discovery.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you. Another question here. How did you go about getting community members involved?
Hired them.
Yep.
The Invasive Species Centers, the grant money that we applied for directly funded one of our high school students who work with us for the summer. So we were able to, and we like to think of things in this department as a holistic. So we all manage the patch of invasive Phragmites, but this student also helped in terms of protecting our wetlands, doing our turtle work, and we think about it as it is all interconnected, and that's why we kind of like to do things as a group and make sure everyone has the opportunity to learn the knowledge of cutting and invasive species. Outreach is another thing. It's always fun to get out and learn and teach the young kids who are going to be the generations coming up and taking over these positions and making our leaders and our decision makers.
For sure, that's so important. It's great that that's such a priority too. Another question here. This person says, thanks for your presentation. Are there any invasive frag sites found upstream in the Magnetawan River?
Wonderful question. I would love to know that. I would suspect so. It's pretty relevant everywhere. And so the top of Mag River goes all the way up to around Kearney, Algonquin Park, the base of Algonquin Park. So it is a really long stretch. There's tons of cottages in there, there's dams. And so the one patch on the Mag River that we currently manage isn't actually on the technical boundaries, but land knows no bounds. And if it's out near the community, it's going to impact the community and our waters and our wetlands and our species. So it's important. Very good question. And perhaps that is something that we can continue to explore and investigate. Yeah, and look at that river system as a whole and work with townships and stuff to protect the waterways.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds great. Do you know if native and non-native Phragmites can hybridize?
I believe the answer is yes. And Georgian Bay forever, I believe there's a professor who specializes, and I apologize, I don't know her name off the top of my head. But that was, I think, one of the reasons they were looking into ID and DNA style, because it was getting more and more difficult to ID with your eyes and the feel and the texture, because things are starting to look a lot alike and hybridize in that fashion. And then the other question is the hybrid dangerous and poses threats to wetlands and healthy ecosystems? I think that's another question that that is not known, and yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Would need more research for sure. Another question here. Where did you store the collected removals for a year?
You know that.
So we collected and stored them out on rock outcrops. The one along the river, it was kind of like near a rocky hill. We just stored it up further up the riverbank in the spring when the flooding and all that happens from all the snowfall. that it doesn't, or snow melting, that doesn't affect it. And yeah, we'll just keep it up, make sure it's out of the way. Just on any really rock outcrop is easy enough to store it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to know. Thank you. A question here, this person says, I may have missed this, but how did you go about getting permission from the rail companies to do this work? We have a lot of issues even getting access to these areas in the US.
Yes, accessing the rails is a interesting area. We didn't get out on the rails this year. We went to get this patch. In terms of if we're thinking about treaties, and the government made these treaties with Indigenous communities, the Anishinaabe people, and then because railroads were a benefit to
Colonization.
Yes, they sort of gave the chunk to railroad companies, and that's kind of how the passage was put through, and it was put through Crown land, which included reserves and communities. So a lot of CN and CP's issues are with safety and train safety because it is dangerous. And so for when we were doing the actual structured research with our master's student, we had a flagger and we had CP coming down and making sure there was no trains while we were out there and working directly with them. Since that project has finished, we are hoping to continue that partnership, but we've had some setbacks in the sense that it is costly for them to send a flagger, but also you run railroads on land that is important to our community and is community land, and there's invasive threats of invasive species. So working with railroads is difficult. This patch was close enough to a road access that we could walk there safely and be able to manage that patch. But I also saw someone in BC say that they ride the rails with their railroad companies. That's a really cool way to continue to monitor it, and perhaps something we should look into to continue to keep an eye out on the railroads and making sure that we have access to the land back there. But yes,
yeah, for sure.
Not the easiest relationship to navigate with train companies.
That's understandable. Well, in the interest of time, we'll have to move on to the next speakers, but your presentation stimulated a lot of interest and conversation between the chat and the Q&A box. So hopefully you can stick around a little longer and just type out those answers in the Q&A box for us. That would be really great.
Yeah, no problem. Chimigwech, everyone, for listening.
Chimigwech, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for presenting. We really appreciate it. All right, and I'm happy to introduce our next speakers, Melonee, Montano, and Bazile Panek from the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. They'll be talking about a tribal climate adaptation menu's perspective on invasive species. We're excited to hear your presentation. The floor is yours.
Awesome, Miigwech. Thank you, Madison. I just want to say Miigwech first to past speakers and everybody for allowing us to be here and all the audience out there. Inogoji Gaa-Ondaadag, Gaa-Ondaadag and Dunjba, Magazine Totem. Just to introduce myself in the Ojibwe language, my name is Bazile Panek from Red Cliff, Wisconsin. My position that I'll be sharing some of my knowledge from is the Tribal Climate Adaptation Menu Coordinator at the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. I'll mention what that organization is in just a second. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. I'm gonna invite actually Melonee. Melonee is also my mother, so this is super fun. So I'm gonna let my mom introduce herself.
Miigwech Nengoses. Buju Beba Mikam Gukwe Indigenous Miskabikang and Junjiba, Migazi and Dodane, Melonee Montano Indigo. Melonee Montano, yes, Bazile's mom. And I'm from the Red Cliff Ojibwe Reservation and the Traditional Ecological Knowledge Outreach Specialist for Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, and also a grad student in the Forest and Natural Resource Program with University of Minnesota Twin Cities, but here on behalf of Gukwe today.
Awesome, thanks, Mom. Yeah, so we both work for the same agency, and I'll share my slides now. You guys should be able to see that.
Yes, we can see. It looks great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, we're presenting on behalf of the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, and In multiple different treaties, the Anishinaabe people ceded millions of acres of land to the US federal government. Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, or GLFWC, was created in 1984 and represents 11 different Ojibwe tribes that fall within those ceded territories to help manage hunting, fishing, and gathering, and talk to federal agencies, talk to state agencies on these treaty rights that were reserved in those treaties. So that's what GLFWC is. We're centered out of Odana, Wisconsin, the Bad River Reservation. Happy to be sharing with you all our presentation titled Bakaan and Goji Gaa-Ondaadag, Tribal Climate Adaptation Menu, Perspective on Invasive Species. So we're going to start off with some Indigenous knowledge. Indigenous people view the environment pretty widely, but specifically we're speaking from an Ojibwe lens or Anishinaabe lens today. We view the quote unquote natural resources as our relatives, as our family members, living beings that deserve respect. Originally in our pre-colonial and early colonial communities, traditionally when we were able to practice our ways entirely without conflict, decisions for use of our relatives, harvesting these relatives, hunting for them, was originally communal decisions made with consultation in the entire community. We recognize these beings as our relatives. We acknowledge them. We also had and continue to have reciprocal relationships with them. These beings, such as Wawashgeshi or the white-tailed deer, is giving themselves to us so we can eat. How are we going to give back to the white-tailed deer? What are we going to do to benefit? But today, in a colonial world, management and decision-making for land and the natural environment is no longer communal, but made by individuals, agencies, institutions, and industry even, and operates without the integration of Indigenous knowledge systems. So it's no longer made with input from the community as much as it should be. It also doesn't include Indigenous knowledge systems. Indigenous people have been on this land and living sustainably since time immemorial. So we may have a thing or two to offer when it comes to sustainable relationships with the environment. So this brings me to discuss the tribal adaptation menu, which is the resource we're sharing today. I'm going to pass it over back to discuss the origins of the tribal adaptation menu.
Inogoji. I'm going to leave my camera off for you all just so you can focus on a few things that we're going to be sharing on some of these slides, just to try to get your minds in the right space. But yeah, first of all, I'd like to, again, as Bazile said, introduce the tribal adaptation menu and talk a little bit about its origin. We also refer to it as the TAM. So in the spring of 2017, the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, also known as NIACS, held an Adaptation Forested Watersheds to Climate Change workshop. All of their titles are always long and there's always lots of acronyms, but that was held in Montano, Wisconsin. And many folks attended from the region whose work focused on climate change. As part of the workshop, we broke into small groups to learn how to apply their adaptation menu and workbook to a case study. And so there were several case studies that were submitted early on. And so I didn't submit a case study, but I was teamed up with a few other tribal members and tribal employees that were looking at wild rice restoration on the Lac du Flambeau Reservation. And at the end of the workshop, NIACS asked us for feedback at the meeting as well as afterwards also. And we let them know that everything was great and helpful and all of that, but there was one major issue for us. And that was that the menu, workbook, and the exercises lacked the ability and the framework to run our project through a cultural lens. And so all of the different approaches that were there were very Western and didn't really address the fact that Manoomin, or wild rice, is considered as our relative. And so this eventually led to conversations on how to improve or revise it, the workbook and the menu. And with that came the tribal adaptation menu after a few years of many meetings and meeting as what we refer to as family members. So we call ourselves the TAM fam. We're all the authors of it. And basically we just got together to revise it all from a cultural approach. And so again, that became the tribal adaptation menu. So next slide, Bazile, and I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks for that explanation. So yeah, that was the origins of the Tribal Climate Adaptation Menu is the full title, or the TAM. That resource was developed by multiple different intertribal agencies. College of Menominee Nation, Forest Service had a role in it. A lot of different organizations that had a role and brought some value to the table. So all in all, within the workbook, there are 14 different strategies, over 50 approaches, and over 100 example tactics on how Indigenous communities, environmental agencies, tribal natural resources can adapt to climate change in a way that prioritizes Indigenous values and it emphasizes tribal sovereignty. There's also a section that I'll mention later that helps to bridge communication barriers for federal agencies or other organizations that have the duty to incorporate Indigenous approaches to climate adaptation. And can you remind me of the time? We're done at 2:40. We have about 10 minutes left.
Yep, yeah, you still have some time.
Okay, awesome, thanks. All right, so that's the Tribal Climate Adaptation Menu. We're going to talk about invasives now that we've covered the groundwork. I'll pass it back over.
Thanks, Bazile. Yeah, so now that you've heard about what the TAM is and how it came to be, I'm going to provide you with a few examples of the differences and contrasts in the terms used in both the NIAC's Forest Adaptation Menu and the TAM. So specifically in relation to who we're all here to discuss, the invasive species, better referred to as you mentioned earlier, Bakaan, Inogoji, Gaa-Ondaadag, also known as non-local beings. So as you'll see in the Forest Adaptation Menu, there's some strong language use that carries very negative human-centric terms and concepts. I'll point out prevent, invasive, remove, eradicate, physical or chemical treatments. And now let's look at the same in the TAM. So you can see in the bottom part the terms that we incorporated into the Tribal Adaptation Menu: maintain, improve, balance, Bakaan, Inogoji, Gaa-Ondaadag, remove, but after communication with those beings, and intended actions, which speak to non-local beings as relatives. And now let's get a little bit deeper into these terms. So a little bit of definitions: prevent, stopping something or stopping a process. Invasive, who are we to say as humans, the last order of creation, the last ones to be placed on this earth? What or who, and I emphasize who, is invasive? So again, as beings, as relatives. Remove, this seems familiar. To me, I think about the history of government policies focused on removal of Indians and immigrants simply seeking refuge. So that's a pretty heavy thought. So when we talk about removal of these ones, we talk about our plant relatives, bringing them to the end of their life. And lastly, physical or chemical treatments, removing invasives with foreign invasive chemicals, something that doesn't feel right. Again, removing them. And so I just want you to think about the contrast of these. And maintain, Oxford says to maintain is to provide with necessities for life or existence. Well, you all can probably understand by now how these more culturally appropriate terms speak about our relatives. And next slide, Bazile. So this brings us to take a closer look at non-local beings. After spending a great deal of time basically talking about these terms and how we struggled with them from the mindset of Western versus cultural, and our feelings with them clashed, of course. So we decided it was necessary to speak about them in our native language. And so we sought out guidance from one of our spiritual elders, a spiritual leader. And this is Obazan Lee Staples of St. Croix that you can see pictured here. So the St. Croix Ojibwe Band, which is in Wisconsin. He's a first language Ojibwe language speaker. We requested his help according to our cultural protocol by offering him a sema, or also known as tobacco, and along with a gift bundle, some wild rice, syrup, and some other things. And the name he shared with us for non-local beings basically came from how we speak of them from a cultural lens or cultural sense. Again, Bakaan, Inogoji, Gaa-Ondaadag loosely translates as beings from elsewhere. So he shared with us that they are simply our relatives who are just doing what they were told to do when they were given their initial instructions from the Creator. And our language is tied to our environment and holds the respect, perspectives, and teachings that reflect our worldviews. The name within itself is a teaching, a lesson, a story, and provides instructions on how to treat these beings. Next slide, Bazile, please. Now I'm asking you all to think about just a few of our relatives. And we could talk about this for hours and for days between Bazile and I. We really get into this idea of the clashes of mindsets of who these are. So we're going to talk about them a little bit, especially again as our relatives, and adopting them in. So I want you to think about them as family members. And so garlic mustard, according to the Canadian Encyclopedia, this being is one of the North America's aggressive invasive plants. And so one thing is that aggressive, of course, there's that terminology again, but they offer many gifts to treat. They treat leg ulcers, sores, coughs, colds, things like that. And so I think about, our human relatives who are diabetic, and if this is all they had, would they turn them away? Graceful cattail is another one. And just for a matter of time, I'll save you getting too deep into it, but let's see. So graceful cattail, Canada thistle. And so these are some that are considered invasive to some groups and not invasive to others, federal agencies versus individuals. But one thing I want to point out here is that, again, they have many uses. And so, of course, they're talked about in a real negative light. But you see clippings here from a document that was produced in 1930 by an ethnobotanist Huron Smith. And I encourage you to do a search for that. He worked with many tribes. And in that, what he did was interviewed Ojibwe members in this particular document about the uses of some of these beings. And what it shows is that our relatives, our ancestors in the 1930s were using some of these beings for medicines. And so they weren't turning those invasive species away. And I'm not sure, I can't speak to what kind of treatments they were doing back then. Yep, Huron Smith, Heronsmith. I saw that in the chat, so the spelling is correct. And next slide, Bazile.
Awesome. Yeah, good for sharing that knowledge with us about referring to these as non-local beings from a different light, viewing them as relatives that are at least deserving of some respect, and how some of these species might have some medicines to even offer us. So part of the TAM that I want to mention pretty quickly is the guiding principles. That's almost a standalone document in just the beginning of the TAM that provides general guidance for non-tribal partners working in Indigenous communities, helps you to kind of more understand how to look through an Indigenous lens rather than just your colonial Western lens. Can also help you engage with Indigenous communities if you want to learn more about their perspectives on non-local beings or other various topics of interest. We're going to call this required reading for all of you. So this is your assignment after the conference is done to at least try and read these guiding principles and they'll really help you to understand, get you started on understanding Indigenous perspectives on the environment. The cover of the TAM, there's a QR code you can scan to access the PDF, and also the link there, we'll probably put it in the chat, You can order a free physical copy, glyphwith.org/publications. There's a tab on the left to order educational materials, and you look under the climate change tab. So miigwech bizindawiyeg, thank you all for, there's our emails on the left if you want to contact us, and then a link to the TAM there. So miigwech, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun presenting.
Gee, miigwech, thank you so much. That was really wonderful. Yeah, definitely if you could pop that link into the chat, that would be really useful. If you have any questions for Bazile and Melonee, please pop it into the Q&A box. We do have a couple of minutes for 1 or 2 questions. Seeing a lot of nice positive comments in the chat box. People really enjoying saying they really like the non-local beings phrase and that they'll be using that in the future. I really like that too. It's a good way of thinking of things. Thank you for popping that link in the chat too. Okay, well, for the interest of time, we'll head on over to the workshop now. But thank you both so much for being here. We really do appreciate your time. And it was an excellent presentation.
Miigwech.
Miigwech. So we'll be switching gears here now with a lovely little workshop hosted by our next guest, Lucia Laford, who is an Indigenous arts educator and part-time professor at Algoma University. Lucia will be leading us through a workshop on drawing woodland-style florals while teaching us about the connection to biodiversity, land, and reclamation. If you'd like to follow along, then you'll just need a couple simple little drawing tools like paper, pencils, erasers, markers, and pencil crayons. We're very lucky to have you here, Lucia. Hopefully I didn't miss anything too important there in the little intro for what people will need, but I'll pass it over to you now.
Okay, awesome. Ani bonjour, my name is Lucia Laford. I'm an Indigenous arts educator and a woodland style painter. I'm going to introduce myself in Anishinaabemowin. I'm trying to learn the language. So I'll say Ani bonjour kinaoya, waskine kwe Nidishnakaz, bawating Nidunjba, makwa dodem, Anishinaabe minwa Irish Kwandao. So I'm saying, hello, my name is Lightning Woman. I'm Bear Clan, I'm from Sault Ste. Marie, and I am an Irish and Anishinaabe woman. So for today's workshop, really all you need is a pencil or any drawing materials that you have. I have highlighters with me, some pencils, some markers, some pens. And whether you just want to listen or you just want to doodle on a scrap piece of paper, if you want to get a sketchbook, if you have one, that's awesome too. Okay, so I also, before I start, I also wanted to mention that I have the medicines with me and I always carry them with me wherever I teach. So I've taught all over Ontario. Right now I'm teaching part-time at Algoma University. I'm teaching Anishinaabe art and material culture. But whenever I'm teaching, I'm always having the medicines with us, the 4 sacred medicines. And that's another way as a woodland style artist and an educator that I bring it back to the land, right? So the art that we're going to be doing and the art that I'm going to be talking about, it's not just art, right? It's not just art for art's sake. It's art with ceremony behind it. It's art with a way of life behind it. So I have the medicines here with us today. If I was in person with you guys, I would be smudging with you guys. I also have my drum here with us. I like to carry my items around because for me, woodland style art is ceremony, right? That's the way I was taught. So just a tiny bit about myself and woodland style art so you know the context that we're coming from. Woodland style art is an Anishinaabe art form that's coming from, the 1960s, started by Norval Morris, so people will say. But really, this form of art is coming from time immemorial. It's coming from the pictographs, the petroglyphs, our birch bark scrolls, our forms of communication, how we talked and treated other people, right? So this art form is as old as our ancestors have been here. So the reason that it has such a strong connection to biodiversity and the importance of understanding life around us is because woodland style art is really about that connection that we have to everything around us, whether that's the people, the animals, the nature, the sacred items, everything around us we're connected to. So I'm just going to show you a few examples of woodland style art, just in case you've never heard of it or you can't conjure up what that looks like. So I have this example here that I painted the other day. This painting is just talking about the connection between myself and my father. My father passed away last year, so I was asked to do a painting kind of about some of his teachings towards me. So I have our hair intertwining, I have him reaching up for the stars. But what I really want to stress to you guys, and this applies to the florals as well, is that woodland style art is about, that storytelling, that, and sometimes in textbooks you'll read that it says, woodland style art is showcasing myths. These are not myths to me. I really don't like that word. Or it talks about culture. Woodland style art is not about myth and culture. It's about us as a people, our way of life now, our knowledge, our ways of knowing and our ways of being, and our connection, right? So florals for me are very exciting. I have a little tiny example here. I'll show you two examples of what florals can look like. I have this one here. Now this is a really, it has a lot of black lines on it. I think when I was making this one, I was feeling, kind of caged in since it's the winter time. I'm here in Sault Ste. Marie, so there's a lot of snow here, right? And I'm looking forward to the spring, but also understanding, and this goes back to our knowledge, right, as Indigenous people, that we know that the earth, Aki, we know it's resting right now and it needs that blanket of snow for healing, right? But I'm also looking forward to spring when the Thunderbird awakens, all that new life, right? So I have another example here of florals, and I'll just zoom up close. Okay. And I just want to stress, you may be seeing or noticing that black line, that heavy black line around everything in woodland style art. That's the symbolism of the connection between everything. So, as scientists, I studied biology in university, and this is before I really came into my own as an Indigenous young Anishinaabe woman. But what I was learning is, about that connectivity between things, the root systems, all these beautiful things in nature. And, sometimes it really felt that I was apart from that. But then as I grew, into the woodland style artist I am now understanding that we understand that everything is connected. All these species are connected, right? So that's what makes this really exciting. And that's what I love to talk about in all my workshops. So today, what we're going to be doing, okay, and this is where you just need a piece of paper. It can be a scrap piece of paper too, doesn't matter. I'm going to be using a Sharpie because I want you to be able to see what I'm going to be doing. But if you actually want to color this in, I would recommend starting with pencil, okay, and then maybe using something more permanent and bold like a marker or a pen, okay. And the reason I would start with a pencil is, you can just sketch out your ideas and then you can go back after and trace in all the lines with the black, right? So, and then that way you can erase the pencil lines after. And if you happen to have highlighters, and I'm assuming, a lot of you have highlighters at home, even if they're old ones that you have to pull out of the back of your closet. So that's how we would get to a completed drawing. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you this. This is a spring floral. So for me, when I'm teaching florals, it's really important that I am talking about, the flowers that I'm drawing. So I've seen florals being taught where you can draw whatever flowers you want, and that's awesome. And the one example I showed you, this one, these are just flowers that are kind of made up in my mind, kind of maybe based off things that are, really out there. And that's one way to do florals, and that can be a more mindful way, more meditative or more reflecting on the process. But the way that I teach florals most often is I go back to what's actually around us. So here's what we're going to be, kind of working on. This is my round florals for the springtime. So round spring florals, and it may look complicated, but it's not. We're going to go through the steps really quick, right? And you guys are going to get this and it's going to be awesome. So when I'm talking about these florals, I'm talking about flowers that are, one, from my area, wherever I happen to be, and two, are in season. Now there is, flora that, was here in the wintertime with us, but, we just had that beautiful bare moon in the area that I'm in, Makwa-Gizis. So I just went to a full moon ceremony the other day, and we talked about it now being halfway through winter. And, now that winter is on the leaving end of things, thinking about that spring and thinking about that new life that's underneath that snow, that's ready, you know, it's gaining, it's healing, you know, it's doing all those beautiful things right now. So that's why I chose a spring floral, because it's going to be, we had winter, LOL. Well, we have winter here. There's lots of feet of snow here. So that's why I wanted to choose a spring floral, right? To think about that new life. So these flowers that I chose, okay, I have a bloodroot, hepatica, leatherleaf, northern bog violet, wild strawberries, sesame bellworts. So now for me, it's really important that I actually talk about these flowers when I'm teaching even youth. You know, I teach all ages really, and I teach, you know, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, immigrant, I teach anybody, right? But it's really important to me that I'm naming these flowers and I'm saying, hey, these come from, you know, maybe not Northern Ontario sometimes, but they come from Ontario. And the reason I'm using Ontario as a guideline is not necessarily because I believe in the so-called borders of, you know, Canada, America, and our provinces, but more because it's more accessible. You know, I have yet to see, and I hope I see in the future, you know, an Anishinaabe territory guide to wildflowers, right? That would be amazing, right? Because a lot of the guidebooks now are for Ontario or Northern Ontario, Southern Ontario, Quebec, you know, all these places. So that's why I want to, you know, point that out, is that these are native Ontario spring wildflowers. So they're rather specific. You know, most of them only bloom in the spring. They may carry on into the summer, but it's also really important for me to talk about and to choose specifically flowers that are native to the area that I'm in. I get a lot of people that want to draw, oh, Joe Pitawa. Yeah, I know, he's great. And I really wanted to, you know, talk to him about that too. But so the reason I want to choose native flowers is because I'm always going to be talking about that connection to our ancestors, and not only our ancestors that were two-legged like us, but our ancestors and our brothers and sisters of all those nations that were here before us, right? The plant nation has been here for time immemorial, and we share this land with them. So I want to honor the ones that were already here. And I get lots of requests to do, you know, tulips, especially in the spring, lots of tulips. And there's nothing wrong with doing tulips at all, but it's also to understand that those aren't coming from this area. Those aren't native from here. And it's just like many flowers that we see growing, you know, in people's gardens are not from here. And that's fine, they're beautiful. But I want to really showcase those ones that are here and that have been here, and that also have so many medicines for us. Right. Okay. So let's start, because I could just keep talking about the beautifulness of, you know, spring flowers native to Ontario. So florals. Now this is where you're going to need your pencil or your pen, your, you know, your marker. So when I'm starting to plan out a floral, I am first thinking about, so now I go into my art hat, I put that on, and I think about the principles of design and art. So there's many different principles, right? We don't have to get too much into those, but what we do have to think about is, how do we want to plan things? Now, some people just want to draw wildflowers everywhere and have them, you know, like a field or something, and there's no plan, they're just going for it. And if that's what you want to do today, awesome, go for it. You can start drawing the flowers yourself. And, you know, and if you have guidebooks around, you know, I'm sure some of you have floral guidebooks around you. You know, you can choose the flowers that really speak to you, you know, or you can make those flowers up too. So feel free to just doodle if you want. And if you need that space after, I'm sure, a long day, long week, right? So go ahead and take that space if you need it. But this is how I start my florals. So I talk about the bones or the skeleton of a floral. And I talk about different designs or shapes. So these are just the basic shapes of what the flowers could be. And this is potential designs for them, right? So I'm having designs where there's something in the center blossoming out, or maybe I'm starting with something at the bottom going up. There's just all these different designs, right? And these basic shapes, as in, you know, any art really is just basic shapes. We got circles, squares, triangles, lines, all these things. And even if you look at the most realistic of, you know, hyper realism, it's really just all shapes, right? So I'm starting out with the shapes more as a guide for myself, especially some people might find a blank page very intimidating. Where do I start? And some people, especially kids, they just want to go for it, right? So that's where I start. I start thinking about, how do I want to convey my florals? Do I want them, drooping? Do I want them up, right? And that just creates a different sense in the viewer. So for today, okay, I already have the design that we're going to try and follow together. Okay, so this is what a floral might look like before you start coloring it in. So this is done in marker to show you on the camera, but in real life, you would draw this with pencil, and then you would go back after and trace everything with the black lines, and then you would erase all the pencil marks, and you get left with this beautifully clean black and white image. And once you have that black and white image, it's almost like a coloring book, and that's how you color it in, right? So this floral design has those flowers that I was talking to you about. It has the wild strawberries, it has the bog violets, it has the leather leaf, right? And for me, it's always been really important to catalog the flowers around me that I see, and especially when I'm out on the land, if I'm doing a workshop where I'm bringing people out, I have that sema, I have that tobacco, and we're going on the land, and we're not picking the flowers necessarily, we're just bringing our sketchbook, and we're saying, thank you to the land that we're on, miigwech, and we're looking at those flowers, and maybe we're doing florals from real life, right? That's another way that you can do this. So I'm going to move my camera, and on our sheet of paper, okay, you're going to just start by drawing the main shapes. Okay, so when you're looking at flowers like these, this is really just a circle, right? This is another circle too. When you have flowers that are irregular shaped flowers, they're just triangles or, even bell shapes. So that's what we're going to start doing. We're going to draw in all our shapes. So I'm going to draw in a big circle at the bottom. I'm going to draw in, and now feel free to modify this however you want. This is one design that I'm walking through now, but if you want to put more flowers on there, absolutely go ahead. Now, when I'm looking at this design, there's two smaller circular flowers there. I believe that's the hepatica. So I'm just going to put in 2 circles for my guides there. Okay, I'm moving up to the bellworts that are aptly named, they're bell shaped. So I'm going to draw in, bell shapes, and we're not worried about size right now. They can be, there's no specific size that they have to be. Now, the reason these are varied in size to begin with is that generally in real life, some flowers are bigger than others, and I try and honor that. Just like the strawberry flowers, the wild strawberry flowers that we're going to draw, they're pretty small in real life. So they're at the top of the design, and those guys are relatively small. So I'm going to draw a line up to the top, and I'm going to draw in my 3 little circles, and those are going to be my wild strawberries flowers. Now I have big space right here, and that's where I'm going to fit in that bog violet, or just a violet. And I'm going to draw a big triangle shape. And just like that, you have the basis for floral design. Okay, and this is really planning it out. But if you want to now, add more flowers, if you're using a really big page, then you could start to add more stuff around the side. The next step is really important. Some people ask me, what's the difference between a still life and drawing florals, or why do you connect everything up? Well, when you're drawing a still life, that would be like looking at a vase, and maybe drawing that vase full of flowers, as an object. Now, these in woodland style art, we're not really drawing the realistic shape of the flowers. We're not drawing it to look real. The reason that we're, drawing these florals in the beginning is to show what we feel or how we feel about these flowers, right? We're drawing to show that connection. So that really important aspect for these florals is that they're now going to be connected, right? So now you can draw on these black lines however you want. you know, in my original design, I think I have curving arches like that. You know, I think I have these curving as well. Right, I'm joining up everything. So it's, you know, cohesive, kind of like it, you know, kind of like mushrooms, like they are coming from, you know, one big root system in the ground. Just like trees, you know, with all the roots down in the ground and connecting. It's so cool when you hear about new science that mimics or reflects, I should say, reflects what you've been taught by your elders, right? It's just through different lenses, and you learn about it and you're like, oh, you know, my elder has been saying that for years, you know. So we're connecting these up to whatever line you want. Okay. Now, once we have these main shapes and we have our root system or our connecting pieces drawn in, this is where now you can start to get creative. And yes, you can see, you know, how I've drawn my flowers. So this bloodroot here, okay, it generally does have 8 petals. Now that being said, you don't have to draw 8 petals if you don't want to. You can be more representative in different ways. You know, and I just want to give a little note here too, is that all these plants, set it up for a second, all these plants, they really do have medicinal qualities to them. And sometimes that medicine is not to be ingested, but it's that medicine where we learn about it. So some of the best medicine walks that I've been on, where I've learned the most, is not, okay, you can make a tea out of this, you can make a tea out of that. I mean, those are very helpful and awesome. But some of them have been, okay, now this plant's very poisonous, so you can't, you know, touch it or go near it. But then an elder will start talking about, okay, now that plant there, it's growing there, and, you know, maybe it's very spiky or something. And the habitat that it creates is then that these other little cute, really delicious flowers that all the deer would love to eat can now grow around it without being, you know, eaten all the time. So I really want to stress that all these plants have medicine. Bloodroot's really cool too. When you open that, I mean, bloodroot, it really does look like it's bleeding red. Anyways, okay, we'll keep drawing. So now that I have my basic shapes, that's when you can start to add more shapes and kind of make it a little more complicated. So I would start by drawing in, you know, the centers of your flowers. You can make them any size you want, but they're really just circles inside. You don't even have to do circles. You could draw a star in the middle of your flowers. In my strawberry flowers, I'll add the little circles. Okay. Now, if I want something that's 8 petals, I can just start drawing the 8 petals. Or if I need a little guide, I can just divide up my circle into 8 roughly. And now I can make the petals out of that. So I have 8 spaces, and I'm just going to roughly draw in the shape of my petals. Now, this bloodroot, I kind of made the petals kind of tie shaped, so they are kind of in real life. And I just go in and I add all those petals in. Okay, and if you're doing this in pencil, it'll look like a lot of lines. That's why you go in, and I'll show you an example of a black and white drawing. So now this is the similar design, except it's in a square shape. Okay. But this image right here, this black and white image, I drew it out originally with pencil, exactly the way I'm telling you, you know, adding in my guide shapes, dividing it up, putting in my petals. And then once I had everything exactly the way I wanted it, I took my black marker and I drew and I traced over everything I wanted to keep. Now, all those extra lines that I don't want to keep, like the guide circle or the guide petal lines, I just don't trace those. So that way, when I come with my eraser, I'm just erasing all the pencil marks, and I'm left with this very clean black and white image that I can now color in however I want. If you are using a straight up marker or pen, you know, instead of drawing lots of guidelines for yourself, I would just start drawing flowers. So instead of drawing, you know, this with all the guidelines, I would just try and draw it freehand, you know, since that you don't have an eraser at your disposal. You know, and the reason I do those guide shapes is because it can make it easier for yourself. So there's that same flower, right? It's just one has all the guidelines around it and one, you know, it's just drawn without the guides. Now I'm going to keep going with these flowers here. So let's do a time check. 4:03, great. Got lots of time. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my hepaticas, and they have sometimes, you know, roughly 6, let's go with 6 leaves today. And I'm going to make them more round teardrop shape. So 6 can be a hard number sometimes to draw petals, you know, because you might end up drawing them and then you have no space left over for the 6 petals. So again, I'm going to divide this up into 6, and then I'm just going to add in those nice teardrop or petal shaped petals. Okay, do the same on the other side. And the other great thing about woodland art is that we're not going for perfection. We're not going for, you know, everything to look exactly the same. You know, especially in a short workshop like this, right? You let go of any notions of perfectionism or trying to get everything exactly the same on the other side. You can do that later when you want, when you have much more time to finick with things. But here, right, we're just more concerned about getting the basic shapes. So now we'll move to that bellwort. So I have that basic bell shape, and now I'm just gonna kind of roughly draw in 3 lines. And with those 3 lines, I'm just gonna, you know, kind of roughly make the ends of them kind of like they have little fingers reaching out. Okay, so just page, that's kind of what it's gonna look like, right? I've styled it with 4 different petals, you know, 2 outer petals and 2 inner petals. Okay. Now I'm going to move on to the bog violet, the northern bog violet. Now these are triangular or regular shaped flowers, you know, for any of you that have your wildflower guidebooks, you know, go to the irregular flower section and look at all those fun shaped flowers. They're really fun to draw. I mean, it's great to have a mix of round flowers in varying sizes, and then some very cool irregular shaped flowers. And there's lots out there. So these northern bog violets, I'm styling them with 3 petals. So I'm going to have a little base of a head. That's really just another little baby triangle, the bottom. And then I'm going to have 3 almost lip shaped petals coming out. So I'm just going to draw in these kind of lip shapes. Once I have those, now it's really just the wild strawberries. They tend to have 5 petals. So I would, now splitting in 5 is really kind of the most difficult. So I'm just going to roughly kind of split in 5. I think of a star shape, you know, when you're drawing a star, the way you would as a kid, or starfish, you know, that's what I'm thinking of. And I'm just roughly guiding that in. And then I'm just drawing the petals in, and they're kind of fan shaped or triangular shaped in this drawing. Okay, there we go. So those are all my flowers. And now we've gone from a very basic drawing to a drawing with much more detail in it. Okay, now this is the stage where if you're still using that pencil and you want to transition over to a marker, I would, you know, maybe try adding in some leaves. Now, sometimes when I'm teaching about the florals, I really do, you know, draw in the leaves kind of the way they look in real life. And again, it's not because I'm going for realism. It's because I'm showing that to honor what these plants look like, you know, but more in a spiritual sense. And that's why I'm not too concerned about spacing or anything. So I would just, but we're not going to worry about the leaves today. I'm just going to draw in some random shaped leaves just for fun. And you can have your leaves any shapes that you want. There's like that classic leaf shape. You can have long, skinny, thin leaves. You can have kind of these round, bubbly leaves. You can draw thorns in a Métis style of beadwork. Sometimes they talk about little tiny footprints going along the stem of things, So there's many different ways to draw this, right? And there's many teachings in those ways of drawing things in woodland style art. However, today, let's just draw some fun shaped leaves, whatever kind of leaves that you can think of. So I'm gonna add those in. I'm gonna add some spikes because, and now you can see that there's just, it's just getting busier and busier, right? Which adds more interest. Now, if you really want a simplistic floral, I would not draw in any of the leaves or any of the extra things. I would just have a real simple pattern. But when you're drawing, you have to think about what kind of mood you're in, honoring that, and also honoring, what are you trying to make the viewer think when you're looking at it? And I mean, that's what people think of as artists. I'm really angry, and when the viewer's viewing this, I want the viewer to be angry too, or disgusted, or happy, or whatever. So you can convey that with just lines. Now, the other cool thing about woodland style art is that the black line around everything, that's showing that connection, it's very important. That can have really personal elements to it. So some woodland style artists, you could tell just from their line work. So this is called line work, doing those black lines. You can tell it's just them. As soon as you see their line work, that it's them as an artist. They don't even have to sign it. You don't even have to see the name. So you can add a lot of personality in this black line. If you really like dots, I could go in and just start adding a whole bunch of dots, right? And just like that one example I showed you earlier that had a whole bunch of wispy lines going everywhere, you can add those in too, right? That can represent many different things. But there's so much that you can add in personality wise, and you just have to, I find the biggest barrier with this, especially with adults that, maybe have a tendency to perfectionism, you can be nerve-wracking, right? So you just want to give your space and allow yourself, you want to allow yourself to have that space to just make black marks on the page, and, coming from that lens of connection and stuff like that. So once you're happy with your design, maybe you want to add flowers. I have this random flower over here. I'm going to connect that up. For the sake of this, I'll draw on another one. Oops. Petals are a little different on this one. Just draw that in right here. And I'll connect that up too. Okay. So now if this was in pencil, I would take my black marker and I would trace everything that I want to keep. And then from there, I would erase all those pencil marks. And I'm going to show you an example of what I mean. I would erase all those pencil marks, and then I'd be left with a clean black and white image, and I'd be able to draw or color that in. Okay. The other thing too, florals, they don't have to be the same color as the flower in real life. As woodland style art, we're concerned with, again, maybe how we see things spiritually, or what we know is there, but maybe we can't see. So, animals, insects see in, as they see flowers differently than us, and or they can. And, so it's just like, so my father was a woodland style artist as well. That's how I learned to paint woodland style art. But he used to have these beautiful paintings, and he has this one called At the Rapids, or Life at the Sioux Rapids. Now, here in the Sioux, then the place called Bawating, the place, where Lake Superior is 21 feet higher than Lake Huron. Before there was locks, before there was canals, there was free-flowing water that was self-regulating between the two lakes, right? When they put in those locks, they really changed the ecosystem. And I just, want you guys to think about that, how different all of the Great Lakes watershed system would be if, all these lock systems weren't put in. Anyways, point being is that at the Bawating Rapids is that place, that meeting place on Turtle Island, kind of really the heart of Turtle Island. oh no, I started talking about locks and now I forgot what I was talking about. Very passionate about the water system here. Oh, we'll just transition to something else. What was I gonna say? Well, the lock system in Bawating is very important that, the place of rapids where we are. So Bawating itself has many different flowers, right? Colors and how they're different for colors of flowers. Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, those colors of flowers. Okay, in that painting, my dad had done the Life of the Sioux Rapids. Okay, there is, when you go there, you can see the rapids still, but, we know as Anishinaabe people that this is the land of our ancestors and that, our people have lived there in the rapids on Whitefish Island and around the area for a long, long, long time. Now, if you go there, you might not be able to see all those spirits, but my dad did this amazing, huge painting of all the spirits at the rapids. So as Woodland style artists, we know these things to be true. And although you may not be able to see them with your eyes, you can feel them or know that they're there. So just like with the colors of the flowers, you don't have to really reflect what's happening as you see it with your eyes, because that's just a very limited lens. So give yourself permission to, use whatever colors you want. And you can use singular colors too. Sometimes in the winter, I'm really drawn to do black and white paintings. Again, reflecting what's happening, just outside my window. It's so bright here because there's so much snow. I have to close all the blinds because you'll just go snow blind, right? Because there's just so much snow out there. But that black and white, when you have a painting or a drawing just like that, with the absence of color, now you're really reflecting on the spirituality of whatever you're drawing or whatever you're painting. Because colors, I get this question all the time too. Do colors mean stuff in Woodland style art? They can, but they don't have to. Sometimes in Woodland style art, people get caught up in, oh, what's this story you're telling it? I want to hear the story. And sometimes, there isn't necessarily this huge long story. Sometimes it's just, I was thinking about thunderbirds and I'll show you this example. This example is of a thunderbird that I was teaching a class to high school students about thunderbirds. And, maybe I was having a rough day. I don't really remember, but I was just thinking about my own emotional state and I was frustrated or something. So in this woodland painting, I've kind of added my black line work to reflect however I was feeling, while teaching about thunderbirds and, the great power that they have. So, your black lines can reflect that from you, right? So it's very personal and your personal experience as a person living on this land. So whether you're Indigenous or not, whether you're Anishinaabe or not, you are still connected to this land, because you have your home here. So if I move to any other country in the world, I am not necessarily having blood from that country, but if I'm going to live there and make a home there, I'm going to connect to the people that have been there occupying and living on that land, right? Or try my best to connect, right? So that's what's really important in this. So in these florals, you can add whatever colors you want. You can, add no color and think about that absence, or, sometimes people say spirits, one teaching, everybody's teachings are different, but I've heard this teaching many times about, spirits being able to see that red color and tying red ribbons on things, or being in ceremony and having, red ribbons, to signify to the spirits what we're doing, or, purple ribbons to think, about that healing, all these different teachings, right? So sometimes, like in this painting, is there a reason that the background is yellow? No, actually, I had leftover paint from the students, from a girl that squirted out way too much yellow. So that's why I used yellow. But sometimes they really do have meaning. So it's up to you how you want to color those in. We have 13 minutes. I just also wanted to open up to questions as well, because for this next part, you're going to be coloring in. Right. And I'll keep talking about florals for another few minutes, but I just want to let you know, if you do have a question while we still have time, please ask away. I really do enjoy and I'm very passionate about teaching about this style of art and the importance of these florals, and not just teaching it for art's sake, but again, teaching it with all those lessons in mind about, you know, biodiversity and, you know, why do we have certain forests up here that look the way they do versus other forests, and, you know, respecting those and connecting all those teachings from maybe a very scientific biology lens to an Indigenous perspective, and then bring it all together in art. It's one of my favorite things. And then, you know, doing that for the youth. I teach a lot of youth workshops, right? And that can be very enjoyable, especially when they just get something, you know, or they've already known something to be true. They just didn't maybe have the language that we do to say it. Yeah, it's very exciting. So I really do encourage you to color this in, though. I'm going to color mine in. Okay. I don't know how the question and answer period works, but if it's in the chat, if someone could let me know, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I can definitely read out some questions for you.
Okay.
One person is asking if you can please give a quick demo of the little footprints on the stem, please.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, okay, they look a few different ways, but let's say that now this would be for beading sometimes. Like when I'm looking at Métis beadwork, it's very obviously these little tiny footprints, what they look like. Now, floral traditions also come from, okay, we're coming from the land. We're starting at the land as of our ancestors to our land now, but we're starting from before we had beads, we had literally all what the forest had to offer us. And there was a lot, right? So beads, these little tiny things, right? And I'll just show you, I'll draw a stem, and sometimes, now I don't know if you can picture this in beadwork. It can look like that, or they can look like, I'll show you in a second. They can look like, they look like, oh, show it for another minute. They can look like little, just like two little feet walking next to the stem. And now when you see beadwork, especially Métis beadwork, you'll see that. And those have very different teachings, right? And I'm not Métis, so I don't know that much about it other than I know it's there. And when I see it, I know it's, you know, that type of beadwork. Yeah, and so for me as a woodland style artist, I'm really trying to honor my family as Indigenous artists, because it's not just my dad that was an Indigenous artist, a woodland style artist, I should say. Lots of my family were, right? And also honoring all those generations before that. Maybe the term, you know, fine art wasn't there, but we were making art just by being alive and living our way of life, right? So that's what I'm trying to do myself. Is there any more questions?
There is another one asking if the painting of your dad's at the Rapid is available online. They said they would love to see it. And there's lots of love in the chat for your paintings. They're absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. If you Google my dad, John Laford, there is lots of his artwork online. And that painting that I'm talking about is actually at the Art Gallery of Algoma here. I don't think it's out right now, but it's such a big painting that it does come out. It's a part of their permanent collection, so it does cycle around. Yeah. And then if you Google my name too, you'll see examples of my work, Lucia Laford. But yeah, I tried to pack a lot in there. That's because woodland style art is, you know, it's very connected. You cannot separate woodland style art and our way of life, which includes, you know, land and land back and even food sovereignty, right? So sometimes when I'm drawing florals, oh, I forgot to mention this. Sometimes when you're drawing florals, it doesn't just have to be florals, right? It doesn't just have to be these flowers. It can incorporate plant nations. It can incorporate star nations, right? It can incorporate really anything that you would like it to, because they're all connected, right? So I've done floral drawings that have had, you know, stars in them. And sometimes, you know, when we're thinking about blueberries, the top of the blueberries is mimicking that star because the blueberries are looking up at the stars, right? You know, which connects back to fish. You know, what else is looking up at stars? The fish. So, and you know, there's just so many teachings, right, that can be encompassed in these florals. So sometimes when I'm drawing a floral for my own self, you know, I'll try not to have a story in mind or a way of thinking. I'll just let it flow. And then other times I'll think specifically about the teachings around one plant and, you know, how it's helped, you know, or like even just as simplest as strawberries or daemon, you know, being that woman's medicine and, you know, the blueberries being that men's medicine, you know, and what that means and the balance between those things, right? And I incorporate florals into all my work too. And I do a little bit of beadwork, but that's not my strong suit. I enjoy it for a little bit before I get frustrated. But painting is a great way for me to really be a strong Indigenous woman.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Lucia. Very beautiful. There's a question here in the chat. Question from a younger viewer. What's your favorite flower to draw?
Okay, I'm gonna say that it really is wild strawberry flowers because, well, they're just awesome. They're just little tiny cute little flowers that I add into everything. And even if I don't have strawberries in my drawing, I you know, I'll add those in as a nod to that heart. So odaemon, that word day in the odaemon, it's like translates literally, well, you know, to heart berry. So I'm thinking about the heart of myself or the heart of Anishinaabe people. And I'm thinking about incorporating that into whatever design I'm doing. And they're just little tiny, what we drew, they're little tiny flowers, right? So I can add those and intertwine those into everything. And, you know, as a woodland style artist, like I was saying, I do them in lots of different colors and, you know, configurations. But my other type of flower that I really like to draw is irregular shaped flowers. So flowers that are from the side drooping away, or their petals are going down, or really just getting to know the flowers that are around me. For sure, it's really helpful to go on medicine walks, and anything can be a medicine walk. Going out for a walk and being mindful of what's around you is a medicine walk. Is there any other questions?
There is one more that just came in here. Do you have a favorite place or location you like to draw?
So some artists would talk about plein air painting or plein air drawing, which is meaning you're taking your art practice outside. And a lot of people, especially Canadian artists, have made that, you know, famous. Like we talk about the group of 7, drawing the Canadian landscape, making that famous. However, okay, me as an Indigenous artist, I will draw outside all the time anyways, because that's where my connection comes from. And also me understanding that any of the symbols that I'm doing in woodland style art, whether I'm drawing sacred items, you know, feathers, pipes, whatever I'm drawing, none of those images really belong to me. It's not just my interpretation of them, but it's just like sacred items. When I'm carrying those sacred items in my bundle, they don't belong to me. They belong to creation, and I just happen to be the caretaker of them. So my favorite places to draw are the ones where I'm feeling the most connected. And anytime you step foot outside, you can be connected. But here it's probably the beaches up the Lake Superior northern coast. It's full of beaches everywhere. So I really appreciate that. And being with the water is very, very, very helpful and powerful.
Oh yeah, that sounds really nice. Yeah, if anyone else has any questions for Lucia, just please pop it in the chat or the Q&A box and I can definitely ask them. I do just see another one here actually. Do you offer online classes?
I do. So I work at the Art Gallery of Algoma, and we don't have any programming right now, just because it's the winter months. But we will be having programming soon. And then of course I offer my own workshops too, but that's just whenever I have time between what else I'm doing. Well, thank you guys for your time and your questions. And thank you for listening to my take on woodland style art. And I really just want to leave you with the fact that, like I said, you cannot take away this form of art from everything else around it. So when you're looking at woodland style art or Indigenous art throughout Turtle Island, and Turtle Island is the place where we reside, you know, so-called Canada, United States of America. When you're looking at Indigenous art, remember that it's coming from, you know, traditions for time immemorial, right? And respecting those and also respecting the land that it's coming from, because the art is really a reflection of the land and the people, right? And just one thing before we go, I know it's only 3 minutes, I could just keep talking, but think about the importance of that art that you're seeing and how it's connecting back, and maybe asking yourself sometimes why it's not held or centered in that place of high esteem, right? Because we have pictographs and petroglyphs here that are not treated the same way as they are in other countries where it's, you know, they are really cool sites that people guard really heavily. You know, there's caves in France with cave drawings, right? And those sites are treated a lot differently than the than the art that we have here all across Turtle Island. And that's where Woodland style art is coming from, those pictographs and those petroglyphs, right? And they've been here forever. So if you have pictographs or petroglyphs around your area, go see them, and, you know, be nice to them. Don't touch them, but really look at those and feel that connection to that land for sure. So I'll say Chimigwich, and it was lovely to be here. Thank you guys for your time, for sure. And thank you, Invasive Species Conference, for having me.
Of course, Chimigwesh, Lucia, that's so wonderful to have you here. I really enjoyed your workshop, and based on the chat, I think everyone else did too. There's lots of thanks and appreciation going on there. It was really nice just to get lost in the creativity and just to really connect with what I'm drawing and why I'm drawing it. So I really appreciate you and your time. You're an absolutely excellent teacher, and it was the perfect way to end our speaker session for the forum.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Of course, Chimigwech. I'll pass it over to Mackenzie now.
Hey, thanks so much, Maddie and Lucia. I've been looking forward to this workshop all day, and I think it was a great way to close off the day, as many of our attendees in the chat agreed. So thank you again to Lucia and to our wonderful speakers, not just this session, but all day today. I am going to share my screen briefly here as we get ready for our Invasive Species Center Awards. We're going to take a quick break to give everybody a minute or two bathroom break. And please reconvene and join us in a couple of minutes for our Invasive Species Center Awards. So we're really looking forward to celebrating some great work in invasive species management from across the province. So looking forward to seeing you back in a couple of minutes.
Hello and welcome to the Invasive Species Center 2023 Awards. My name is Sarah Rang. I'm the Executive Director of the Invasive Species Center and so pleased to join with you today as we honor organizations and individuals for their amazing work in invasive species. Just wanted to start with a very brief land acknowledgement and a big thanks to all the folks and speakers from Indigenous communities that have joined with us today. It's really been wonderful. The Invasive Species Center does honor the long history of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation peoples on the lands now known as Canada, and strives to show respect to their ancestors, their communities, and to them individually. We greatly appreciate the significance of the lands, waters, and all living things, and offer our gratitude to the Indigenous people for their care. Our relationships with Indigenous communities are important, and we will continue to listen and learn how we can be in a good relationship with Indigenous peoples, the lands and waters, all living things, and act accordingly. We acknowledge that our head office of the Invasive Species Center is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Batchewana, and the Garden River First Nations, as well as the longtime settlement of the Métis people in the Robinson-Huron Treaty area. So just wanted to welcome you to the second annual Invasive Species Center Awards. It's a great, happy occasion to take a moment to celebrate success of the individuals that make up our world in invasive species. So today we will be walking through 4 awards that we are giving out. And I wanted just to start off with a message from Ross Romano, who is the member of Provincial Parliament for Sault Ste. Marie, which is the home of the Invasive Species Center. Ross has been a huge supporter of the Invasive Species Center and appreciate his ongoing assistance. So Ross will just provide us with some brief welcoming remarks, and then we will move right into the award ceremony. So here comes Ross.
Good afternoon. My name is Ross Romano, and I am your MPP for Sault Ste. Marie, and I would like to welcome you to the 2023 Invasive Species Center Awards. It is my pleasure to be with you here today as we recognize and celebrate the leadership and commitment of individuals and organizations who help keep Canada's land and water free from invasive species. In Ontario alone, invasive species contribute to an estimated annual cost of $3.6 billion, yes, billion with a B, which impacts the forestry, agriculture, fisheries, healthcare, tourism, and recreation industries. As a growing challenge to our economy, lakes, lands, and communities, we need to work collaboratively in new ways to reduce future impacts. I want to recognize the people and communities that continue to champion and demonstrate the values of excellence, innovation, and leadership in invasive species prevention and management across all of Canada. Protecting our habitat and wildlife from the threat of invasive species is important work, and I applaud the efforts of today's nominees. I want to thank you all for attending Invasive Species Forum this week, and those who will be attending in the next month as well on February 20th to 26th for Invasive Species Awareness Week. Together, our actions can help raise awareness about the importance of preventing the spread of invasive species. I wish you all the very best, and as always, stay safe and have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ross, for those kind words. Just wanted to share with you a little bit of the process very briefly in terms of developing the awards. So we really did want to recognize both the leadership of the people in the organization who help prevent invasive species across Canada. So we developed 4 award categories for those, and we'll be going through those a little bit later. People nominated folks in the field, and they were provided, these nominations were given to an independent panel of judges. The judges then assessed and scored each submission according to specific criteria for each categories. The judges' scores were then aggregated together to produce a winner. I just wanted to note of the many nominations that we got, how deserving they were. There was often, results were often separated just by a very narrow margin. So I think we can all be proud, not only of our winners today, but all of our nominees. They are doing amazing work out there on the landscape. The award winners will receive a beautiful award mounted on maple wood, and they'll be permanently commemorated as well on a recognition wall at the Invasive Species Center. We're also developing a new Walk of Fame page on the Invasive Species Center website, so we can honor those who walk the walk on invasive species. Big shout out to a couple of our ISC board members who help support this work, Nicola Crawhall and Dave Burden. And today we're very happy to welcome our exceptional nominees and actually honor them. So without further ado, let's move to our first award, which is our Young Professional Award. And this is presented to an individual who's between the ages of 19 and 40, who's practicing in the field of invasive species. And they've demonstrated outstanding achievement early in their career to address invasive species. So I'd like to present to you the nominees for the Young Professional Award. Alison Craig from Lallemand Plant Care, Olivier Liberge, Maxime Gay, and Matt Tessier from Ozero Solutions. Julie Bellevue from Ontario Parks, Southeast Zone, Fraser Smith from F. Smith Consulting, Christian Deschankelet from Red Fox Forestry, Jessica Henderson from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and Paige Kuzumarsi from the Alberta Invasive Species Council. The winner of the Young Professional Award is a company that was founded and operated by 3 25-year-old graduates in mechanical engineering. They saw an opportunity to help protect Canadian lakes and waters from aquatic invasive species by developing innovative products, which helped to facilitate the decontamination of all the boats. They built about 15 different units, and they've worked with municipalities to install them all around Quebec. And they plan to continue this progress and work with additional municipalities this year. And the winner is... Our winner is Ozero Solutions, and I'm hoping that Olivier can see a thing that says, please accept being a panelist and come on and join us and say a few words. So Olivier, you should see in your screen a little button that says, please accept the request to be a panelist. And that will allow you to come on and join us and say a few words. If you're having difficulty, just let us know. So I'll hand it over to Olivier to say a few words. If you just want to turn your camera on and your mic, that will be great. Thanks. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. So first of all, thanks to the Invasive Species Center for this award and the opportunity it represents for us. For the past 3 years, we've been working really hard to limit the spread of aquatic invasive species by helping municipalities all around Quebec to install both decontamination units. This all started as a bachelor's degree project at the University of Sherbrooke. We were students looking to have a positive impact on the environment. And at the end of our degree, we decided to work full-time in Ozero Solutions. We are here today because many people and organizations helped us throughout this journey. Aquaction really helped us at the start of the project during summer 2020 with coaching and mentorship. So thanks to them for the support. We also wanted to thank the Asset, our business accelerator. They've been with us since the beginning of Ozero as a startup. They've given us personalized support to help us grow our impact. So thanks to all the team working at the Asset. As of today, we have 17 boat decontamination units in Quebec, and we are very grateful to all the municipalities we work with for trusting us. This means a lot. And finally, we wanted to say that we will be working hard this summer to increase our impact, not only here in Quebec, but also in other Canadian provinces. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Olivier, and congratulations. It's a great honor, and wish you all the best in your work, and so glad to see people working on preventing aquatic invasive species in our lakes and rivers. So important. So congratulations. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to turn now to our second award, which is our Leadership Award. And the Leadership Award is presented to an individual or an organization who champions and breaks new ground. They lead and transform invasive species in Canada with meaningful and long-lasting invasive species work. So we have several nominees for our Leadership Award, and I'll go through them with you. We have John Kemp, who is from the Giant Hogweed Mitigation Project or Community Group. From Algoma University, represented here by Dr. Pedro Antunes. We have him and his lab. We also have Lawrence Warner from Don't Mess with the Dawn, and a coalition of groups working together to deliver the Ontario Youth Naturalist Program, which is overseen by Dr. Linda Rotenberg, but represented here by Emily Wolst. And we actually have a tie for the Leadership Award this year, so we're very delighted to present two awards in this category. One of the winners of the Leadership Award is a professor in a biology department at a university, and developed research and education programs aimed at breaking ground to help prevention and management of invasive species. They help train students at various different levels, and much of their work has been published, cited, and actually presented extensively. So they've created long-lasting impacts in the community in the prevention of invasive species and extended training to that critical next generation of community champions. The other winner in our Leadership Award is a community program, which is established to help enable local youth to develop as future leaders in environmental sustainability and advocacy. One of the key elements of this program is the development of the invasive species module, which includes an introduction to common invasive species in Ontario, and also a hands-on experimental learning activity, which is delivered by Parks Canada staff. And some of these learning activities included a trip to Georgian Bay Islands National Park, where students participated in frag removal. So this opportunity, coupled with hands-on opportunities, helped youth understand what invasive species are all about and the actions that are required to help prevent and manage them. So it's my pleasure to announce the winners of the Leadership Award are congratulations to the winners. If Pedro Antunes has a button, which I'm hoping in your screen, Pedro, would show up as please accept as a panelist, just click on that button. That'll enable you to come forward and join us on stage. And the same for you, Emily. I'm hoping that you see a button that will also allow you to come on stage and say a few words. So Pedro, thank you for joining us. Welcome and congratulations. We'll start with you first if you'd like to say a few words and then turn it over to Emily. Please go ahead.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a great honor to be standing here surrounded by so many people who are dedicated to protecting our planet from the damaging effects of invasive species. I'm grateful to the Invasive Species Center for creating this Leadership Award and for recognizing the hard work and dedication of those who are working to make a difference. Invasive species, they pose a major threat to biodiversity and ecosystems worldwide, and their impacts are only compounded by the challenges of climate change and other global change issues. The ISC is playing a critical role in ensuring that Canada is better protected from invasive species. by protecting the necessary resources and expertise to prevent, detect, control these species. So it's important to remember, though, that the work developed over the past decade here at Algoma University in the Plant and Soil Ecology Lab is the result of teamwork. So I would like to thank Algoma University for its unwavering commitment to scientific research and for providing the necessary support to allow this work to happen here. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to NSERC and the Canada Research Chairs Program for their funding, which has been obviously instrumental in helping us achieve our goals. Of course, my students and postdoctoral researchers and collaborators, they have been the driving force behind our success, and I'm deeply thankful for their dedication and hard work. I would also like to thank the wider community of Sault Ste. Marie for being so supportive over the years. A great community, a great city, a great place to live and work. Finally, I also want to thank my family, both here in Canada and my family in Portugal, for always being there for me and supporting me in all the endeavors, and even those included moving so far away. So yes, I'm truly honored, and I'm grateful to the Invasive Species Center for this recognition. And I'm committed to continuing to work to address the challenges of invasive species. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pedro, very much. And thanks to all your hard work of your students, and really glad, and congratulations. I'll turn it over now to Emily to say a few words as well. Emily, it's all yours. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, thank you so much to the Invasive Species Center for creating this award and for your support of this program. I began working on this Ontario Youth Naturalist program about 2 years ago now, actually. And it's amazing just seeing the youth involved outside, in the field, how excited they are to be removing Phragmites, which you wouldn't think that they would be so excited to do that, but they are. And it's amazing to see everything that they're learning through this program. Obviously, Dr. Linda Rodenberg, she is the director of my office. And so she helped with the founding of this program. And we've had numerous instructors over the past few months who have helped to facilitate the modules. So I'd like to thank Bob Bowles, as he was one of the instructors, as well as David Hawk. I'd also like to thank Parks Canada, as they helped us to facilitate the trip to Georgian Bay Islands National Park, where students were able to participate in the Phragmites Bowl. And I'd also like to thank the various students over the past few months at Lakehead University who have helped assist me with the coordination of this program. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emily, and congratulations, Pedro. Congratulations, Emily, on winning the Leadership Award. It's just so lovely to have positive stories in invasive species, and really you and your organizations represent that. So congratulations. Thanks so much. I'd like to turn now to the next award, our third award, which is the Innovation Award. And the Innovation Award is presented to an individual or an organization who has used their creative abilities to put ideas into practice. They've transformed or improved invasive species management in Canada and produced enduring outcomes in terms of the skillful application of novel and useful ideas. So we have some nominees for the Innovation Award, and they are Dr. Ryan Brook from the University of Saskatchewan and Curtis Avery from Nipissing First Nation. And the winner of the award, the Innovation Award, is an associate professor who's worked for over 13 years developing a research program on invasive wild pigs across Canada that has been amazingly interdisciplinary and applied. They've co-authored peer-reviewed papers on the distribution and spread of invasive pigs in Canada and made these results publicly available. They focused on community engagement and have developed a very active media presence, which has helped to inform Canadians about the risks and impacts of wild pigs. They're some of the first researchers to use the technique of nets from helicopters to help capture wild pigs. And so just want to say a hearty congratulations, and the winner of the Invasive Species Center Innovation Award is Congratulations, Dr. Ryan Brook. I'm hoping that you see a little icon that says, please accept as a panelist. If you push that button, you should be on stage here, and then you can turn your camera on and say a few words. So thank you, Ryan. I see you there. If you'd just like to turn your camera on when you're ready and say a few words. Congratulations on winning the Innovation Award. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. Great thanks to Invasive Species Center for this award. That's very exciting. We've been at this invasive wild pig thing for a long time. And 13 years ago, we really didn't know much at all about them. And so the University of Saskatchewan has been hugely supportive of this work throughout. And I started as a lowly assistant professor and since have progressed through a little bit since then. Obviously, the overwhelming driving force behind this has been undergraduates, graduate students, postdocs, and a massive list of collaborators and funders. And you know, when we started, we knew little, and now pigs have actually expanded to over 1 million square kilometers in Canada. So they are still an ongoing risk, and certainly a lot of work yet to be done to get the good word out and try and get ahead of this highly invasive large mammal. So thanks again. Greatly appreciate this award.
No problem. It's our pleasure to honor you and all your contributions to an incredibly important issue, invasive pigs. And certainly we've seen it gain lots of traction and really does help tell the invasive species story. So thank you, Ryan, for all your work there. Would like to talk about our fourth and last award. We have a Career Achievement Award, and this award is presented to an individual or an organization who has consistently demonstrated high value and high quality results over their lifetime, a period of 20 years or more. They've made significant and sustained contributions to invasive species management in Canada through outstanding and long-lasting achievement. And the nominees for the Career Achievement Award are Jim McCready from the Forest Health Network on the Eastern Ontario Model Forest, and Steve Hounsell from the Ontario Biodiversity Council, the former chair. And the winner of the Career Achievement Award is the registered professional forester and a certified arborist who's worked in the forest health field for many years and has a strong passion for preventing and managing invasive species. They've been involved in a nonprofit that works in new ways to sustain and manage forest resources for over 40 years. Their focus is on providing training, webinars, resources, and serving as an alert network for incoming forest invasive threats. And the winner of the Career Achievement Award is Jim McCready. Jim, if you hoping that you see a little icon with join me as accept as a panelist, if you'd like to turn that on and join us on stage here, you can then turn your camera on and say a few words. If you're having trouble, don't worry. The icon should be in terms of your email, and then you can just turn your camera on and join us. I see you there, Jim. If you'd like to turn your camera on and say a few words, we greatly congratulate you on winning the Career Achievement Award. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Hi, Jim. How are you?
How are you?
Congratulations.
This is actually, this award should actually go to the Forest Health Network. We got 27 partners that sit at the table, and they are the ones that have actually pushed me forward and doing what I'm doing today. We are made up of 27 partners from Eastern Ontario, Western Quebec, and Northern New York State. And we got involved when the Emerald Ash Borer hit Ottawa. We had great success with City of Ottawa, National Capital Commission, Gatineau, the city of Gatineau. And when the emerald ash borer hit, we had great success and support from Canadian Forest Service and Canadian CFIA. And these days, we are very pleased to have 27 partners at the table. We're watching the hemlock woolly adelgid. We're watching the spotted lanternfly. We're watching also a number of things that are going to come our way. And of course, we are very closely linked with Cornell University. And as a group, we do our training in Canton, New York, which saves us a lot of travel west of Peterborough, and we can get down there in an hour and a half. I got to thank the Invasive Species Center. They have come to our end of the province and have put on webinars and what have you. And they are a great partner with us right now, as a lot of the others. Akwesasne, a great partner. They're on the St. Lawrence and they're watching all these insects very closely. And so is the National Thousand Islands National Parks, because they are the ones that think they're going to get hit first. I have to thank the Invasive Species Center for this award. And like I said, it belongs to the Regional Forest Health Network, not just myself, because we all work in the same direction and will continue working on these invasives that seem to be heading our way.
Thanks very much, Jim, and understand that it is the team always, and a network that you have collaborated with, and really just salute you and your team and network in terms of all the work that you've done in terms of invasive species forest monitoring. It's really been amazing. So I'm going to ask all the, just stay there for a moment if you wouldn't mind, Jim. We're going to turn the cameras on for all the winners. We're going to take a screenshot because this is the era of Zoom. So we're going to take a screenshot of all the winners so that we'll distribute it and also share it out through our network. So wondering, Olivier, if you wouldn't mind joining us on stage and as well, and we'll just take a screenshot. While we're getting that set up, I just wanted to thank everybody for who's been involved in the award ceremony. We have a little planning team. We have our Invasive Species Board, who has been very supportive. I wanted to thank everyone who's been nominated, who are doing amazing work in terms of invasive species management, and you as the audience who've participated today, and the exceptional, both the nominees and the winners today. So just wondering if Olivier wants to join us on screen, if that's available. If that's not, we'll go ahead and take a screenshot of the winners here, and we'll add Olivier in as well. So just smile and we'll take a screenshot and share it out. Yeah. Thanks very much. Yeah. Just also wanted to let you know there's a few other ways that are coming up in terms of things that we can participate in together. We have Invasive Species Awareness Week, which is February the 20th to the 26th. There's lots that all of us can do to get involved. We can share different social media posts. If you need any inspirations, there's some materials on the Invasive Species Center website. And so don't hesitate to take a look at those. Those are free and available for download. It's a good chance for us to tell together the compelling story of invasive species to a really broad audience. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of other opportunities. The Invasive Species Microgrant program will be opening, and also the projects that relate to Phragmites control funds. So consider your projects. We'll be doing a call for applications in early March. And there's more information that will be available on our website. If you want early notification, please sign up for our newsletter, and we'll keep you up to date there. And we're also delighted to the Invasive Species Center is the secretariat for the International Conference of Aquatic Invasive Species, or ICASE, which is an international conference that we run every 2 years. And we're delighted to be hosting it this year in Nova Scotia, May 12th to the 16th. So please consider, if you work in the invasive species field, it's a great opportunity to meet colleagues from all over the world and share your knowledge and meet some new friends and have a little fun at the same time. So those are some activities that are coming up at the Invasive Species Center, really in cooperation and collaboration always with all our partners. And just to remind you, tomorrow we'll be starting tomorrow morning at 8:45. We have the parliamentary assistant from the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food who's going to be welcoming us. And then we have a very active day of programming as well. I'm hoping that you're enjoying the forum so far at the end of day 2. I thank you all for your participation, your knowledge, your enthusiasm and experience. So it's really wonderful to join with you today and have a chance to honor you, all the nominees, and present some awards. So a big thank you to all of you. Don't forget to join in tomorrow, 8:45, same time, same place. And we'll pick it up there again. Many thanks to everybody.